Roman Harper, SEC analyst, was talking about his concerns for the Alabama Crimson Tide in 2021, and he had some interesting things to say that I don't think are necessarily wrong, but I think can be mitigated a little bit easier than some may expect, and we need to get into this. But before we do, as always, y'all know the drill. I want to hear from y'all. And given that we're about to talk about what the biggest concerns for Alabama are in 2021, what is your biggest concern for the Alabama Crimson Tide this coming up season? I can't wait to hear from y'all. And if you are new to this channel, be sure to subscribe, as I am on my way to 5,000 subscribers in my first year, and I'd love to have you along for the journey. I do constant college football content, player reviews, film analysis, talk style videos like this, and you don't want to miss a single video because we have multiple quarterback videos coming out, collabing with Quarterback Spotlight, so be sure to hit that bell notification. If you did enjoy this video, be sure to like and comment down below, and that's not just relegated to this channel. That really does go a long ways, more so than I think most people realize, in helping content creators get picked up and maintained by the YouTube algorithm. But with all of that being said, let's hop into what Roman Harper said his biggest concerns for the Alabama Crimson Tide were going into 2021. And I'm just going to come right off the top with the two biggest ones he said, and we're going to dissect them each afterwards. First and foremost, it was the offensive line. He had issues and worries at the offensive line, given the fact that Alabama is losing three really high-quality players along that offensive front, and that makes complete sense. Look, if there was one unit, and even I said I'm probably the most excited, or at least that's one of the position groups I'm the most excited about, is this offensive line unit. But if someone wanted to tell me that that's the unit they have the most concern about, I would understand it, but I would also have counter arguments as to why I'm not all that concerned, and we're going to get into those. The second area he was kind of questioning, also a natural one to question, I'm less concerned about this area though, is wide receiver. Now, I understand when you lose Jerry Jeudy, Henry Ruggs, Devontae Smith, and Jalen Waddle to the draft, that is freakishly rare, and you don't have to have those guys in order to find success. It just really helps when you have them. But even saying that, if you look at the receivers Alabama already has on campus mixed with the guys they just signed, the receiving class really isn't one that I'm very worried about, especially when you add into the mix a Christian Leary and a JoJo Earl, because their speed, their agility, their explosiveness is going to make defenses adjust and play Alabama's receivers differently, right? Even if only one of them is on the field and it's just simply as a decoy, the defense has to respect the deep ball on an entirely different level now. And because of that, Alabama's big body receivers in an Ajayi Hall, a Ja'Cory Brooks will really be able to eat up a lot of underneath things. Now, even aside from that, Javon Baker has been receiving rave reviews while on campus. And Javon Baker is a guy who, when I've talked about, I've had people say, okay, well, why didn't he play this past year? Well, that's because he played Devontae Smith's position, and Sark had a complete scheme buster with Smith in that position, and it just didn't work out that way. Everything kind of worked out where Javon Baker didn't get the reps most of us were hoping he would get. But that being said, his rave reviews have continued from all through last year, through the spring, and it's continuing right now. This is a kid who I cannot wait to see. And so when you look at the Alabama receiving core, and even though Christian Leary, JoJo Earl, those are guys that are going to come in and contribute, even if they have a while to come in and a little bit of a learning curve, if you just take your three receivers and your tight end being Billingsley as tight end, Jaleel Billingsley, receiver 1, Javon Baker, receiver 2, or however they move Mechie, whether they move him to X or keep him at Z, you're going to have Javon Baker, John Mechie, and Slade Bolden on the field to start, and I understand there's a lot of conversation about Slade Bolden as to how long he'll be able to maintain that spot, and here's what I will say about Slade Bolden. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. He doesn't have the athleticism that Christian Leary and JoJo Earl have. Those guys are diamonds in the rough. That Alabama was lucky enough to find both of them, and even luckier that they both came out in the same class. That's incredible. Christian Leary is like Henry Ruggs or Marquise Goodwin reincarnated, and JoJo Earl reminds me a lot of either a Jalen Waddle or a Devin Hester, and you get them both, and that's just unbelievable. Aside from him maybe not being as athletic, or there's not maybe to it, he isn't as athletic as those guys. He is incredibly smart in his ability to find the open space, especially against zone. And y'all, that's going to be incredibly important when Alabama is fielding a new offensive coordinator, a new offensive line, and a new quarterback. The ability for Alabama to maintain a good tight end, good running backs, and a slot receiver such as Slade Bolden that is really good on bailout routes and just as a quick out route, because he's very crafty in his route running ability on short to intermediate routes because of his burst. That's where he can really generate a lot of separation, not so much on the longer routes because he doesn't have the top end speed as some of your other guys, but he is fast enough to get it done, make no mistake about it. Slade is a very athletic guy with the abilities to get it done. And so when I even look at those three receivers, I already have confidence. And then you add in one of the most athletic tight ends in all of college football in Jaleel Billingsley. Remember, this is a guy who was on kickoff coverage and then was taking the ball on kickoff return. That's how athletic he is. That's how much Sark, the special teams coach, and Nick Saban thought about their tight end, that they would let him return kicks. That's incredibly scary to think about. And then you're going to mix him with Bill O'Brien, who has a history of utilizing the tight end at an extreme degree. So when I add in Bill O'Brien, when I add in the type of receivers Alabama currently has on roster, and then the guys they're bringing in, the mix of thunder and lightning with like a Ja'Cory Brooks, Ajayi Hall, Christian Leary, JoJo Earl, and I put in my mind how that will all play together, I'm not too concerned about the Alabama wide receiver room. Like I said, I have complete faith in the three guys we talked about, and we didn't even talk about guys such as Tyu Jones, Bell, Trayshawn Holden, and Xavier Williams, all guys who are incredibly capable. This will be more of a receiver by committee room than it was last year, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. The Crimson Tide will have awesome production at receiver. I have no doubt about that. Now, the offensive line. This is the one where I easily understand where he's coming from, but I might not necessarily agree. And his biggest concern on the offensive line, aside from losing three seniors, was left tackle. Now, the reason that's not my biggest concern, even though losing Leatherwood sucks, you never want to lose a guy as talented as Leatherwood, but we're very happy to see him go on to the draft and continue the lineage of Alabama offensive linemen going into the NFL. The reason I'm not too concerned about that is because all of Alabama's quarterbacks are right-handed, and Alabama currently has Evan Neal on roster, who is incredibly talented, who I believe will ultimately be moved over from right tackle to left tackle. Now, the way and the reason why ultimately you would do that, even aside from his talent, is you don't want two brand new guys on your blind side. Alabama already has to replace their left tackle, their left guard, and their center, and so you don't want three new faces all in a line on the blind side. And so with that, it's super easy to move Neal over to left tackle. That way you get your new left guard, whoever that will be, and your center, even though you have to replace Landon Dickerson, and that's really tough, you do have a guy that got snaps last year, and probably the most meaningful snaps he could have had coming in the playoffs and then against Ohio State. He has the most meaningful minutes you could possibly have as a backup, and because of that, I'm very excited about Owens coming in at the center. He's going to be a huge, huge piece. And then when you look at it, you're just left really to replace that right tackle position. And that's assuming that they don't slide a guy that's currently there out to right tackle. But even when you think about replacing the right tackle, you look at the recruiting class and it's dude, and there's a chance, we talked about in the Alabama offensive line preview, that Alabama could field three guys on this offensive line this year if Tommy Brockermeyer is able to start, J.C. Latham and Evan Neal are all on the field at the same time. That's going to be 3 out of the 5 offensive linemen, all being within the top 10 in their respective classes in recruiting, and that's astronomical. So while I do agree, if there was an area I'd point a finger to that could be a little bit of a contention for Alabama, it would be offensive line. It's also an area that I'm very excited for the Crimson Tide, because even though they lose Kyle Flood, Roman Harper points that out, they do get Doug Marrone, who has a extensive history of working with offensive line, so you have to be extremely excited about that. So when you think about it like that, even though I think the offensive line is a concern, I don't think it's a concern to the level of really anything super alarming. The Crimson Tide just got the greatest recruiting class of all time, and in that recruiting class recruited the greatest offensive line class of all time. And even if none of those guys see the field, there's a lot of good depth at Alabama right now, such as Kendall Randolph, who's drawn rave reviews and could easily step in there and do a more than serviceable job. And so the Alabama Crimson Tide offensive line, I think, will be a special unit. I don't know that it will come together day one, but look, they're going to be a very, very talented unit when it's all said and done because they have so many talented guys, and I really actually trust Doug Marrone coaching them to get them right. And you've heard on the recruiting trail guys like Devin Campbell already expressing excitement about a Doug Marrone, which as a Crimson Tide fan gets me excited because they see something that they are very much well excited about with Doug Marrone, and I think that will translate to on the field. But I really cannot wait for this Crimson Tide offensive line unit, and I can't wait to hear from y'all. Hop down in the comments and let me know what position group or what your biggest area for concern is for Alabama in 2021. That's it. See ya.